What's something that mentally or emotionally broke you? Story 1. I could honestly give a lot of things that have messed me up, but I've bounced back from most of them. The one thing that broke me entirely last year was the death of my grandfather. He'd had a stroke around April 2021. On April 1st, 2022, he had to be rushed to the hospital. I dropped everything to go see him. I'd been pretty close with him growing up. My grandparents raised me and my sister, and he and I used to go to Gettysburg together a lot. He was in the hospital all of April with declining health. We would visit all the time. He developed sepsis and we wanted to move him to hospice, but by the end of the month, even moving him would probably kill him. April 28th, it was my first week at a new job, and my aunt texted that we should all hurry over to the hospital because they didn't think there was much time. I left work and stayed at the hospital with my family all day. The nurses let us break COVID protocol and all stay in the room as long as we were quiet. We all had gowns, masks, and gloves anyway because he had sepsis. At that point, he was practically in a coma. We thought he would pass that day, but he didn't. And when it came time for me to leave, I knew it would be the last time I'd see him alive. I cried so much I almost threw up, and it was almost impossible to drag me out. The next day he was gone. The following week was the funeral and viewing. The viewing broke me too. I cried so much those days, especially when we had to close the casket for the funeral. We all left little things for him to be buried with: cherry chapstick, Guinness, and a little alligator plush I'd brought. I have the matching one. He always used to say, "See you later, alligator," and I would say, "After a while, crocodile." So now I always tell him, "See you later, alligator," at his grave, as that's what I told him before he died and before they buried him. April 29th this year will mark the first full year he's been gone. I've never handled death well, so it still hurts a lot. But he was in so much pain, and I know he went peacefully, and he's not suffering anymore. He believed in heaven, and that's where I hope he is. Story 2. My fiancée died the day after we got engaged. She died of meningitis. We spent an amazing day together while she was back in town from college, and I asked her that afternoon. Later, she said her legs were going numb and her back hurt. We went to the hospital because they had just had a whole presentation about the symptoms of meningitis at her school. The doctor did some tests and said everything was negative, so they sent us home. We went to bed thinking everything would be fine. I woke up sometime around 2 a.m. and looked at her. She was covered in sweat and turning blue, so I picked her up and carried her to the car. We rushed back to the ER, but she stopped breathing before we got there and didn't regain consciousness again. At least I was holding her hand the whole way. The doctor said they got her heart started a couple of times, but all of her organs failed and her body completely shut down, so they had to call it. Later, they asked if I wanted the ring, but they said they had to cut it off because her body had swollen so much. I told them to keep it because I wouldn't have been able to handle what it meant if it was in one piece. To answer the other obvious question, I'm as all right as I get. Lately, I've been thinking about our first days more than the last one. It's hard to tell if that makes it better or worse, though. Relationships are hard. Anytime things get too good, there's a compulsion to pull away for self-preservation. There's no making it through another round of that. Story 3. I'm a nurse, and I've seen so many awful things, but for whatever reason, one that sticks with me and pops up in my memories often happened in nursing school. I was doing clinicals, student nurse working in a hospital, and my patient's son had died in a car wreck the night before. The family was coming to tell him during my shift. When they arrived, I stepped out to give them privacy, but I heard his cry. The sound a parent makes when they are told their child is gone is something that will chill you to the bone. He also happened to be on telemetry, a heart monitor, and I was watching his rhythm when he got the news. He threw several PCs, and I swear it was like watching his heart break. Story 4. Watching my grandma on my mom's side go through hospice. I have never seen a human slowly deteriorate like that. I was happy to think I would get to spend some time with her and comfort her because the year prior, my other grandma passed unexpectedly, and I never got to say goodbye. As each day went on, she slowly lost any ability to think or properly communicate to the point that it was like her mind was already gone. When she was close to the end, she was making these gargling sounds that sounded like she was drowning. That sound alone is something I will never forget. It was the worst experience of death I have ever witnessed. It was literally watching a person you love just slowly fade away mentally. The amount of weight she lost in just those few days. Story 5. I was going through the beginnings of a divorce, unbeknownst to me. It was March 2020, and my birthday just happened to be on the day they announced the initial COVID lockdown. I got home late from work, and my wife at the time had done nothing for my birthday. I was in my 30s, didn't really celebrate anymore anyway. But no card, no gift, not even a mention of my birthday, and she'd eaten the last of my post-work meals. And of course, everything was shut down and closed early, so I went off trying to find a gas station for a protein bar. I wasn't really that put out. It was par for the course. But I woke up early the next morning to take care of our 6-year-old. He's autistic, and emotional connection isn't always the highest on his priority list. But I'm in his room at 5 in the morning, and he says, "Daddy, it was your birthday yesterday. How come you didn't get any presents?" I made something up, and he asks, "Will you get any today?" I say, "Probably not, pal, but it's okay." Grown-ups don't really celebrate birthdays like kids do. He goes into his closet, gets all his construction paper, and starts taping it together. Then he starts wrapping up his own toys and arranges them in a pile of presents. He says, "This is for you, Daddy." And he and I opened up presents for my birthday. I don't remember a lot of my birthdays, but I remember this one. Story 6. 10 years ago, I was falsely arrested for a DUI. I was acquitted, but I lost everything in the process. It wasn't just the arrest, it was the whole system and procedures along the way that broke me. I had always defended cops and the judicial system, but you would never know unless you are pulled through it. First, after the arrest, I was fired. I was a bar manager for a huge HOA near Yosemite. I guess they thought of me as a liability, but when I asked why I was fired, they said, "We don't have to give you a reason." But I later found out that was the reason. Then I just watched my house foreclosed, my car stolen and destroyed, and everything else, storage auction, go away. By the time I was arraigned, it was all gone. I watched how the DA kept extending and prolonging the trial, saying he was still investigating, while my court-appointed lawyer kept trying to get me to plead. I had to show up in court every time, so all they were trying to do was get me to not show. Nobody cared if I was innocent. They just wanted their conviction percentage to stay high. Anyway, I was found not guilty in 10 minutes by a jury. It took 5 years of my life, and no lawyer would call back when I wanted to sue. Cops are untouchable. I'm a whole different person since this occurred. I hate going anywhere. I don't trust anyone. I hate law enforcement and courts, and I don't trust them to keep us safe anymore. It's just a business, that's all. Officers bring in the sales, and courts make sure people pay. Story 7. Life in general. I've been through so much that people don't even believe me anymore. My father abused my mom, and when she ran away, he started hitting me. I told the schools when I was 6, and they just turned around and told my dad everything I said. He told them I have a vivid imagination, and then proceeded to throw me off the roof of our house when, keep in mind, I was 6 years old. He hit me in the head with a metal bat when I was 9, shot me with a BB gun, tried to stab me, hit me in the head with beer bottles, and coming home from school to see him slouched over with a bottle of pills in his hand, thinking he was gone, wasn't fun either. Ultimately, I became homeless at 12 and worked at a McDonald's on night shifts while I did school during the day from 12 to 18, then stayed at McDonald's until the beginning of 2020 when I finally got a tax job. I could never go to homeless shelters because if the authorities find you, they just drop you off at the border of another state. I won't say which ones. I've seen it happen to many people I knew during my time on the street. Now I'm finally away from the worst parts of my life, but the trauma is even worse. I can't sleep. I can barely breathe. I have heart problems, and I'm sure I'm just one bad day away from a mental breakdown. I've seen things, violence, cruelty, mutilation, and it's shown me the darkest parts of humanity and also how rare the good parts really are. Story 8. My last job in IT, I'd been working as a developer for nearly 25 years, pretty much since I left school. It had become very obvious to me over the last 10 years or so that what was expected of developers in terms of working hours was increasing. The reality is that despite all the recent tech layoffs, there is still a shortage of developers because each one specializes in a different language or platform, etc. If a company needs a certain number of developers and can't fill those positions, then the next best thing is to demand your existing developers work longer hours and come in at weekends, etc. Of course, the pay is good, but what's the point of earning 6 figures a year when you don't get to put your kids to bed in the evening because you're working so late? The last few jobs I was in had that issue. The general expectation to work late with criticism and negative performance reviews if you refused. I jumped between different companies hoping for something better, and I thought I had landed in a good one. It was a startup in the food ordering industry, and they seemed pretty cool at the start, but I quickly learned that they were terrible. The founders expected you to be in the office until at least 8 or 9 every night, and also expected you to answer any messages within minutes, even at nighttime and on weekends. What broke me, though, was being on holiday with my family and getting a message from one of the founders that the main website and product of the company had gone down. They had an absolutely terrible deployment policy and would deploy immediately when software was ready rather than waiting till less busy days, which would be safer. They deployed a new buggy version with no rollback script, and the whole thing came tumbling down. The founder demanded that absolutely everyone return to the office immediately. I told him I was on holiday, and his response was to say if I didn't come back, I would be out of a job. I was tempted to refuse, but I'd only been in the job a few weeks, so I came back from my holiday early. When I got back to the office, I was told by the same guy that I should have stayed on holiday because I didn't have the skills to fix the problem, as it wasn't anything I had worked on. I quit, and while I didn't have a nervous breakdown, the whole thing affected me emotionally in a really bad way, and it took several months for me to get motivated again. I made the decision to get out of IT, and now I'm self-employed as a woodworker carpenter. Story 9. The depth of just how terribly my mother has handled the situation with my oldest brother. At 17, I realized he was grooming me. I told on him, and it was swept under the rug. I was made to suffer in silence while he was allowed to be hostile to me as long as it was passive-aggressive. I was not allowed to talk about what had happened. Reporting him wasn't even an option extended to me, and I never went to therapy for it while I lived at home. I found out later, after I moved out, that a different sister of mine had been groomed as well. It started when she was roughly 8 years old and had continued into her teen years. My mother discovered it when I came forward about how he was grooming me. My mother made my sister keep it a secret from me, and thus made me think it was an isolated incident. 2.5 weeks ago, my youngest sister told me she had been harmed by that very same brother. I determined that based on the timeline she gave me, this had been happening around the same time I told our mother he had been grooming me, which meant that my mother, even after knowing what he had been doing to 2 of her daughters already, did not act to protect my youngest sister from him. Or rather, she did because she kicked him out after he was found to be trying to peep on her at night. But she never dug deep enough into the situation to realize he had been doing more than peeping during the times she hadn't realized he was doing things. Each of these 3 instances has broken me emotionally. And this last time, it broke me really hard. Because as I cried to my college best friend, I had thought the nightmare was finally over, and instead I realized it had never ended. And if left in the hands of my mother, it never would. We'd keep finding out stuff like this, over and over, until someone with moral integrity made it end. The wound would keep opening, for me, each time I thought about how someone else had gone through what I did or worse. And honestly, I think this 3rd time broke things beyond repair. I reported my brother to CPS for what he has done and told everyone who already knew about the situation that I had done so. The result is pretty much none of my family that I wasn't already estranged from will talk to me. I knew that was going to be the result. It was part of what had kept me from reporting over my own abuse, and yet this time I did not care. Because realizing that the nightmare won't end if it keeps getting swept under the rug made me realize that I have to make it end regardless of the personal cost to me. Otherwise, we run the risk of children we don't even know having their own personal hell inflicted on them by my brother. In my eyes, we had a moral duty to make sure my brother couldn't hurt anyone else, and I was the only one strong enough to both see and act on it. I don't regret the choice I made. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But still, I had to break to make that choice, and I've broken more since actually doing it. Edit. I didn't think this was going to blow up the way it did. So let me add some context before too many more people go around thinking I am the morally superior one in this situation. I left out some smaller details because, frankly, I thought I'd just yell into the void, and this would not gain much attention. My youngest sister is 17. She was harmed 8 years ago and only just discovered 2.5 weeks ago what had happened. She wanted the choice to control when and how it came out that she had been harmed, and I promised her I would respect that. Except after talking to my therapist a few times, I decided that was not a promise I could keep, and so I broke my promise. My sister has had to tell all her younger siblings what was done to her, so that when CPS shows up on their doorstep, they're not shocked. My older brother lives an hour or so away from them. He does not have ready access to them and was already forbidden from coming over to their place. So other children were in danger, but none of my siblings were. By and large, the danger to my family was already over with. My choice was also not just one of selflessness and a desire to protect other children. I kind of wanted to see everything go up in metaphorical flames. I resent the thought of my mother having to face the family and explain why she had swept all of this under the rug and why she wasn't the one to report it. I resent the thought of my older brother losing everything over this. I find satisfaction in the thought of him facing consequences for what he did. The way he made me suffer my whole childhood while he bullied me for my autism. I knew what I did would hurt my youngest sister and make her feel like the situation was out of her control. I knew it, and I did it. Took control away from a victimized person because I selfishly wanted the nightmare to be over for me. For her and my other sister too, mind you, I also wanted the nightmare to be over. But ultimately, I wanted it over with for me most of all. So rest assured, at least in my own eyes, I am not the hero here. I did the right thing for both the right and wrong reasons. Knowing that it would throw someone else's world into chaos. I do not deserve praise. I do not deserve compliments. Frankly, I don't know what I feel like I deserve, but being treated like some hero, isn't it? Story 10. Breaking up with my emotionally and verbally abusive girlfriend of 6 years after she missed my dad's funeral to get her dress fitted for a wedding. Watching my dad waste away from cancer only a few years after he quit being an alcoholic. Having to accept that although I got close to it, I would never truly get to know him as a friend or father. Losing tens of thousands of dollars going back to help my family through the death of my dad, selling vehicles, maintaining and fixing multiple homes in different states, and not being able to process it myself, only to have my mom tell me she wished it was me who had died instead of my dad. Lost my grandpa the year before. Meanwhile, I was processing childhood abuse, severe neglect, accepting I don't have blood-related family I can depend on, and got laid off. Too much all at once? Ketamine therapy saved my life. Story 11. My mom died, which wasn't that bad because she was very sick and our relationship wasn't the best. And I was too overwhelmed with the aftermath and everything that I passed the time I could reject the inheritance. She left me nothing, so I was left with all the costs for the funeral, the eviction of the flat, open bills, new bills from the hospital, and so on. Plus, the situation in my job was very bad at that time. I felt rejected, had not much to do, and was constantly thinking about quitting, which I couldn't do because we were depending on my salary. So one day on a Sunday, I just broke down. I wasn't able to do the minimum tasks. Bringing out the trash? No way. Cooking meals? Nope. Luckily, I live in Europe, so I got to the doctor, was diagnosed with deep depression, and went home on a paid sick leave for 6 weeks. I never thought about me having depression because my idea of it was totally wrong. I always thought depression means sitting in the corner of a dark room and crying constantly. Nope, I was in a good mood, laughing with my wife and watching movies. But thinking about the invoices gave me a panic attack, cold sweats and shivering. Story 12. Realizing my family wasn't the picture-perfect loving family I had always believed it was. My parents weren't always too strict, so I idolized them, and my siblings tolerated me most of the time, which seemed better than what my friends had. Took me years to realize that what they were doing wasn't love. It was backhanded and cruel in ways that made me vulnerable. I always thought I was the problem and deserved any anger or backlash I got, even when I knew I'd done nothing wrong. I just thought that they would never hurt me, so there must be a reason they were upset. Eventually, I learned that mental abuse is still abuse. Even if they rarely laid a hand on me, which still happened, especially with my dad, they were still causing me harm. I only really realized it when I got into my current relationship and was loved unconditionally and not ever treated harshly. Instead, communicated with and supported. Story 13. I used to watch a lot of gore on gore subs. That continued until one video I saw just undid all the desensitizing I had done until then. It was a father hanging himself in front of a mirror and recording it because his wife left him for another man, and he wanted to guilt her by ending his life. He talks a bit into the camera, then prepares everything, kicks the chair, and hangs himself. He starts twitching around because he used a very thin rope and was barely off the ground. He was likely in a lot of pain. I thought it couldn't get any worse when a small boy, maybe 7 years old, walks into frame. It was his son, and I didn't expect him to understand what was going on. But he did. The boy held his father's hand and cried. When that didn't help stop his father from twitching around like a fish in the air, he started to try and push the chair back under his feet. All that while still crying. The video ends there, but he ultimately failed to save his father because a commenter confirmed that the father had passed. He died right in front of his son, who was too small to have been left alone in this world, and, very unfortunately, the child was big enough to understand and remember what he just saw, and to remember that he failed. I never watched gore ever again, and I'm pretty sensitive to it now. I wouldn't say it broke me, but it was the saddest video I've ever seen. Story 14. After a horrible workday of being injured and being mistreated by my manager at the time, I took a dangerous combination of pills. I didn't know this was basically a death sentence. Xanax and oxycodone for the pain. Thought, why not? I'll have a little wine too. That tiny bit of wine got me in a state where I swear I was speaking in tongues and doing strange things with my hands. I no longer had thoughts, just basically my inner voice in what sounded like an empty room with a booming echo. I tried going to the bathroom and just collapsed on the floor. Didn't know it at the time, but I was dying from a drug overdose. The chilling part was how peaceful I felt, like I could just have the best sleep of my life if I closed my eyes. I don't know what it was, but I think my will to live started kicking in with two vivid images. I pictured my mom finding out her 30-year-old daughter passed from an accidental overdose, and I couldn't stand for her to not only process that news, but this was not the way I wanted to go. The image of me just being lifeless on some cold tile floor, smeared makeup, and no time left. No way. My boyfriend, now fiancé, came in at the point I was slowly starting to get up, and he burst into tears and held me in a way I'm convinced healed me. Story 15. I have an inoperable brain tumor. I was 17 when it actually popped up on my scans, but because my biological mother disliked me so much as a child and had this ongoing conflict with me, she didn't pursue any further treatment or tell me about it. She lied and said it was excess brain fluid, which, if I had known then what I know now, would have saved me. It's only now that it's become something life-threatening, and she's pretending not to know anything. She knew this thing was there. Maybe it stayed dormant for a while, but I could have gotten much earlier intervention if she had just told the truth. Instead, she had me convinced that my seizures and headaches were me being dramatic. She spread other lies about me, all in the name of not being wrong and getting sympathy. I knew she had a pathological side to her, but finding out she lied about this and is now pretending she knows nothing, it's breaking me. I miss our nights where I'd make dinner and we would watch our favorite shows together. I can't stand to watch them anymore because of her. Thinking about her hurts. I might lose my leg and ability to swallow because the tumor grew too much in the wrong spot in my brain. If I had early intervention, this might not even have needed to happen. It may have, it may not have. But for a parent to hide vital information like this just so they won't be wrong and can keep the image of being a good mother, it's tearing me apart. And everyone is quick to defend her actions, as if it's not completely wrong to withhold information like this and lie about it. They defend everything she does, from making me sleep outside even in freezing temperatures when I was a teen, to this. I don't think my life matters to anyone, not even myself at this point, so long as she's happy, right? Story 16. My older sister manipulated me and the people around me until I went off to college. She lied to her teachers, using me to gain pity from them. They were cold to me when they were eventually my teachers, calling me out in class for getting answers wrong. She lied to our neighbors, and that was the first time I caught her red-handed doing so. I told my mother, and she decided for the sake of my sister's reputation to not make her tell them she had lied. I don't think she really believed me. She claimed after a month that she spoke with one of the neighbors, but she never made my sister tell anyone the truth out of fear of embarrassing her. My sister would throw such intense tantrums when the family didn't accept her narrative. I went away to college, but my sister didn't. So all the years I was in high school, my sister was still in the house. It was only after I left the state for college that my mother eventually admitted to me that it had come out in my sister's therapy that she was manipulating me. The therapist had figured this out while I was a freshman in high school. So all those years of my teachers being cold to me, my mother knew the truth. It took her more than 6 years to admit it to me. My sister is now married to a man who had a child from a previous marriage. She's good with the kid, but her husband is showing signs that he is being manipulated. My mother and I are trying to patch things over, but she admitted that she only feels free enough to spend time with me because my sister is busy with her new family. If my sister was still focused on us, I probably wouldn't be around. It wasn't until I went to college that I was able to have mutual respect with my professors, and my roommates became a family like I'd never had. Now I'm back in my parents' city, and I feel myself reverting back to the victim mentality I had for my whole life. Now I'm considering moving across the country, putting myself through college a second time for a specialized degree that will let me travel the world. My mom is sad because she feels like this is the first time we've been able to be together, but to me it feels like she chose to never believe me before. We've started family therapy, and my therapist is suggesting that we are all victims of my sister, and that my mother and father did their best, which I believe. But I can't get over the feeling that my mother chose to believe my sister all those years, when she should have been protecting me. I know we are all victims, but my parents were supposed to be protecting me. It's hard for me to get over. Story 17. The night that I made a CPS report against my egg donor, I do not consider her to be my mother. I have 15-year-old sisters who live with my egg donor. They've confided in me about the psychological abuse she inflicts on them, and it matched up perfectly with the abuse she inflicted on me when I was their age. Egg donor had just gotten done yelling at them and throwing profanities their way. My sisters are part of the LGBT community, and that has been the main issue. Both my sisters were sobbing and were attempting to run out of the house because they feared for their safety. She would get physical whenever we tried to get away from her. They asked me to get CPS involved themselves because they were scared to continue to live with her. One of them self-harms, and they both attempt to run away whenever egg donor causes trouble. Now I'm struggling to find an affordable lawyer to help me explore my options in keeping them safe. It hasn't been easy since the only evidence I have is text messages between my sisters, my own experience living with our egg donor, and the fact that they live in my uncle's house, who is a hoarder and got arrested for DV. Story 18. Being bullied my entire life because of my autism. I've only ever made 8 friends in my entire life, and only 3 of them are still my friends. Everyone else my age seems to hate me. There is an entire group of boys in my school who have made it their goal to hurt me. They have an entire group chat where they say bad things about me. I know this because one of them literally added me to the group chat. They constantly call my name out in the hallway with a high-pitched voice. They say horrible things about me behind my back, but loud enough that I can hear. They call me slurs. They mimic my stimming. They laugh at me when I have meltdowns. One even attempted to steal from me once. And one even started throwing rocks at me. And once, one chased me around with a cicada because he knew I was terrified of bugs. The reason they all do this is because they find my reactions funny. Whenever something like this happens, I cry and scream at them to stop and flap my hands, and they laugh. I've told my parents. I've told the teachers. I've told the principal. They say they'll punish them and get them to stop, but they continue. This has been going on for 3 years now. I used to do really well in school, but now I get mostly C's because of the stress they put me through. I don't know how to get them to stop. I just want people to leave me alone. Story 19. My girlfriend of 2 years was assaulted yesterday. It's a long-distance relationship. She's in Canada, and I'm in the southern U.S. I feel useless. I can't do anything about it. I can't comfort her. I did all I could, including warning her about the guy and telling her to get the law involved the first time she was harassed and subsequently assaulted by him. She's an immigrant and feels trapped. Yesterday, it escalated. She sent me texts, told me what happened, called me, crying. We got her school and the authorities involved. That guy is rightfully getting his life turned upside down. I'm afraid. He took her first kiss from her, stole her sense of safety. He might have gotten her pregnant. He didn't even bother to use protection, held her down and forced himself on her. She's in shock, we both are. I fear that if we ever do get to meet, she'll be distant or won't trust me. I mean, how could she? The only intimate contact she's ever had was that horrific incident that took place yesterday. She's so calm about it, though it's so clear something is wrong. She cried all last night, and it felt like I was shot in the heart. I care and genuinely love her, and I don't know how to move forward. I'm afraid that I'll lose her, but I feel like that's a selfish way to act. Story 20. My high school sweetheart and I ended up going to different colleges. I went to a pretty cheap state school. She went to a very expensive private university in a big city. She was having trouble paying tuition, so I sent her a check for something like $10,000 since my tuition was cheap as hell, and she needed it way more. The same day the check arrived, she texted me to say that she'd been seeing someone else, and it was over between us. We had been together for 2.5 years, and she was my first love. Pretty much right up until the day she called it off, we were texting, just Skyping, every single day. She told me about how badly she wanted to be Mrs., my last name, how many kids she wanted to have with me, and what we'd name them. She wanted to grow old with me, etc. Then it was like flipping a light switch. She suddenly had zero interest. She got what she wanted and didn't seem to feel even a tiny bit of regret. She was having a great time at her expensive, prestigious school, making exciting friends and enjoying wonderful opportunities with her new boyfriend, while I was heartbroken and alone in the middle of nowhere. Story 21. My ex-husband continuously cheated on me for 11 years. By the end, I had counted at least 25 women he had been with during our marriage. He also mentally, physically, and emotionally abused me for all those years. He told me I was fat and flabby on a daily basis. I'm 5 feet and 105 pounds. He would tell me I was scary without makeup. He gave me such a huge complex that I wouldn't even go to the mailbox without makeup on. This man destroyed what little confidence I had and turned me into a shell of a person. He stripped me of my identity and made me believe no one would want me, or my 2 children. He was truly awful. When I finally asked for a divorce, I was completely broken and lost. I was so destroyed I couldn't force myself to go to work. A friend came over and offered me coca. So for about a year, I was totally fueled by coca and alcohol. It wasn't long after that another friend introduced me to meth. Not too long after that, I lost everything. My home, kids, pets, my sanity. 1 year later, I lost my freedom. I found myself sitting in prison on a 10-year sentence. I stayed broken, but clean and functional after I was released. Got my kids back and eventually remarried. In all, I was mentally and emotionally broken for over 20 years. It was a long road to find myself again. I'm finally healed and have learned to love myself. Story 22. Getting cheated on, then getting divorced. It was hard enough losing my partner and my best friend at the same time, but I also lost my ability to trust people. I was never the type of person to try to snoop on my partner's texts, ask where they are, ask who they're hanging out with, etc., because I just trusted them and obviously felt comfortable with them living their own life. I still don't do that stuff, but I now have the urge to. I really try to be trusting. But even 5 years later, there's just this sickening gut feeling I get whenever a partner's out doing their own thing, or even just chilling at their own place. What if they are cheating on me? What if they are talking to other people? What if their coworkers or friends they talk to me about are actually someone they're seeing? It's inescapable. I can't even say I know my current partner would never cheat on me, because I felt the same way about my ex. I just have permanent doubts now. I've also noticed in the past couple of years that I'm not really able to get as invested in relationships as I was with my ex. And after some introspection, I think it's because it's a defense mechanism against getting hurt that badly again. I don't do this consciously, but my brain just seems to be in this mode of, you can't ever deeply fall for someone again, because now you know what it's like to lose a person like that. I'm trying to work on that too, but it's like trying to fight an instinct. Like trying to convince myself not to flinch at a ball being thrown at me. It's tough, and it kind of breaks my heart that I don't think I'll ever be the bright-eyed, earnest, romantic person that I used to be. Story 23. At the start of COVID in the US, my then wife freaked out because I was working at a major metropolitan airport construction project, and there was one of the first public outbreaks in the area. I volunteered to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks and then come home. 2 weeks came and went, and she said I couldn't come home for fear of infecting her family and our 3-year-old son. I stayed alone in a hotel room, eating canned food, doing my laundry in the bathtub, prison-style workouts. The hotel was across from a nursing home, where there were ambulances in and out all day. She barely let me talk with my son because she said he wouldn't understand why I wasn't home. When I finally came home after 3 full months for my son's 4th birthday, they all scolded me for being in the hotel that long and that I should have quarantined at home with them long before the outbreak at the airport. She told me then she didn't think she could ever love me again. The thing that broke my heart was my son. When I started the quarantine, he was speaking in fragmented sentences. And when I came home, one of the first things he said was, "Why was Daddy Owl gone?" I missed him. The verbal abuse kept up, with her family telling me, "No one in this house missed or thought about you when you weren't here. It was a lot easier then." I eventually moved out after 6 months and filed for divorce another 6 months later. Story 24. I testified against a masseur who assaulted me during a massage appointment. He was convicted of second-degree assault. A year after I testified, I Googled him out of curiosity. Turns out the courts were careless with paperwork and did not alert my state's Department of Health Board of Massage Therapy. So the man still had his license and was working freelance, visiting other people's homes and giving massages. After another year of navigating bureaucratic nightmares, I was summoned by the Board of Massage Therapy to testify again in the matter of removing his license. Here's the kicker. In the 2 years since the assault, he'd had his record expunged. So in my testimony, there could be no mention of the conviction, and I would have to go through every little detail, he said, she said, all over again. The part that broke me was that this man denied representation at the hearing, so he cross-examined me himself. To be cross-examined and questioned with violating, dehumanizing comments by the very person who assaulted you is a truly horrific experience. The anticipation of it destroyed me, and the experience was harrowing. In the end, they found him guilty again, and now he no longer practices massage. Story 25. My husband that I met in college 40 years ago told me 15 years ago that I was no longer attractive to him and he needed to be with his surgical assistant as a romantic partner. I am with her. I am no longer with you. I don't want a divorce, and if we get a divorce, we cannot be friends, and you can't be a part of my family anymore. I moved to live my whole life in his small town to be around his family because I had none of my own to speak of. I thought for about 10 years that I was living a marriage where I had the privilege to raise my own kids the way I wanted in a nice town, in a nice house. My marriage sucked, but it was something I told myself I agreed to. He said he lived as a bachelor in an apartment near work. It turned out he had been living with his work girlfriend all along, half raising her children and her grandchildren. They call him Grandpa. She's his wife in everything public, and no one even knows what I look like. I think some people think I died or am living somewhere isolated. She called me a freeloader who is not worth her time because she considers herself to have been working while I was raising kids. On my own. I think I had what is known as an emotional breakdown. I deleted all my social media as myself. I think she was stalking me anyway, but okay. I became super non-functional, just like forget it with everything, even eating. The only thing that kept me on any kind of schedule was my pets. They love me. They wake up every morning hoping to see me. And the only thing I curse her with is that she will never be able to own pets because my ex hates them. And I know she likes pets because she once had an adopted dog that one of my adult kids had to take care of while they went to Europe. So forget her. Less broken now, more like fixed up with so much glue you will have to stab me and break me before I die. And it won't feel as bad as last time because I feel less. Story 26. Working as a nurse during COVID times, I wasn't an ER or ICU nurse. Just a community nurse. I was constantly terrified I was going to die for a job that didn't even pay the bills. I was told this is what I signed up for anytime a concern was raised. Like my company taking months to update our mask policies. We suddenly had to altruistically endure company shortcomings for some kind of greater good. Patients got mean. Co-workers started taking it out on one another. Corporate suits sent emails about togetherness and denied time off and raises. We would get tiny bonuses of $50 2 years later and nursing day gifts of baggies of gravel because we rock. I thought I was going to die for a job that could barely pay my bills. I had to reuse masks until they fell apart and wash gloves. We had to ration soap and hand sanitizer. I was afraid to touch anything when I came home and was terrified of infecting my family. Something just broke in me. Suddenly I was terrified to drive because driving was what got me to work. I was needing to pull over on the highway to throw up, thinking I was having a heart attack. I was waking up in the middle of the night crying and panicking because I had to work in a few hours. I couldn't eat. I couldn't handle anything bad or unfamiliar, like bad news or unexpected plot twists in movies. The camera flipped in a movie I was watching, and suddenly I needed to regulate my nervous system again. I quit a year ago. I run an online shop. I tell fortunes. Sometimes I do food delivery. I'm poor. I don't care. I will never ever go back to that again. I don't remember much of that period of my life other than the overwhelming drowning feelings. I'm not all the way better, but I'm getting there. Story 27. I was assaulted at 3 to 4 years old. I don't remember much of it. The main thing I remember is the abuser made me use a nickname for what he did, so that if I ever said, "Oh, that hurt me," no one would know what I was talking about. Thank God my mom knew something was wrong. The police and CPS refused to step in and help, though. That's all a blurry memory now, though. My dad died by suicide when I was 8. He was missing for 5 weeks, and his body was found in the woods. I drive by the tree they marked for the crime scene a few times a year, and it breaks me every single time. I'll never forget that exact location. My mom has bipolar disorder, and as I got older, it became more and more unmanaged. It eventually got to the point she'd scream at everyone about how they ruined her life, how she was the victim in everything, and how she had been wronged her entire life. I had to shelter my 9-year-old younger brother a lot from her behavior. It got to the point she'd throw me over furniture if I ever decided not to put up with her moods. And at 20 years old, she refused to accept me as her child and blamed me for her ruined life. Eventually, she got over that manic episode, but our relationship never fully healed. Story 28. I was in the middle of a stem cell transplant procedure as a donor for my dad. I was receiving Neupogen shots, which for those who don't know, force your body to produce stem cells, but make your bones and joints excruciatingly painful, especially if you get your heart rate up. At the same time, my sister ran away. She left a very vague note about being in love with someone she'd never introduced us to. She left her clothes, her phone, her laptop, her ID, left the front door wide open, and just disappeared. We didn't know if she was trafficked, missing, or worse. She literally just vanished. 3 months later, she turns up in a different state with said boyfriend, who she had apparently met only 3 months prior to leaving. She's pregnant and has found the light of the Lord. Needless to say, we were all furious, but apparently that anger just reinforced her decision. 2 years later, after my dad's procedure was successful, my dad lost his mind, stockpiled weapons, and became a hardcore conspiracy theorist who sends me vaguely coded, threatening messages that he wants to harm me. I no longer speak to my dad. My family members have drained my emotional energy, and I no longer trust any family in the same way I used to. Likely never will. Story 29. Putting up with physical and verbal abuse from my parents for years, but believing in my heart that they still cared about me. I came out as trans to them. I knew it would shock them, but the reaction was much worse than I expected. Although my mom told me she supported me, my dad later outed her in a moment of anger, how she told him that she wanted to hurt herself upon hearing it. Told by dad that I was the girl and what my sis was the boy the whole time, and how they failed as parents, but not for the abuse, of course. They then asked if I was harmed in the past and how I needed to see a therapist. I already was seeing one, but they were unaware. There were other awful things said, like something about how he felt that I was expecting them to throw rainbow and confetti. But it's been a few years since it happened, and I blocked a lot of it out. About a week later, my sister became pregnant, and we both got disowned. My parents were also teenage parents, had always identified as liberal, and are minorities, so although I was expecting something harsh, I wasn't expecting anything like that. My dad was shaming her and calling her awful, awful things. It was a level I thought he would never stoop to, and I had to get away because I felt like I would lose my mind or do something I might regret if I stayed there. My sister was gone by this point, living with her boyfriend who was also toxic and abusive, and I moved away to live with my grandparents, who my parents cut off contact with afterward. COVID happened, and I did not once receive a message or call from my parents to see if I was okay. It's been 4 years of no contact, and at this point, the concept of them as parents is dead to me. Despite all the abuse, I still love them, And I was hoping that as long as I didn't do anything bad and stayed in school, life would be okay. I was wrong, and I still haven't really recovered. I doubt I'll be able to. I can be strong and keep moving forward, but there's a void there. I see people who have parents they admire, who they smile with, and my heart aches. Thank you to anyone who takes the time to read this. Story 30. My teen years through my 20s, and not just because of puberty. Early bloomer, covered in horrible zits and hair by the time I was 12. Skipped a lot of school because I couldn't take the insults. Then at 15, I had to have emergency surgery that resulted in the loss of a large portion of my intestines. Spent 2 years in a wheelchair and sleeping sitting up. Went into serious depression, 2 suicide attempts in as many years. While going through that, Dad got diagnosed with cancer. He was gone in 8 months. My brother immediately left home because he didn't want the responsibility of my mom and his siblings, my little sister and I. I was 17 and had relearned to walk properly by then. I dropped out of high school and got a job, put both my siblings, yes, even the brother, through college, lied to them all that I was also in school, fought creditors since my mom had no idea what to do after Dad died, tried not to let my sister feel my dad's absence as best as I could, talked to no one about how I felt, and would spend hours screaming at myself and crying in parking lots in my car, cut away from friends who wanted to help but couldn't because I felt ashamed of myself for so much I still don't understand. Started getting headaches and turned out there were tumors in my head. Didn't tell the family as I went through treatment for them. Beat the tumors once, they were back in a year. I was 20 by then. Beat them a second time, and they haven't been back since. 8 years after dropping out, I went to night school and got my GED. Couldn't afford college, and I was already under insane debt. There's more, but I feel a weird pressure even reliving this, so I'm gonna stop. I'll be 35 this month. I threw myself into work, took every opportunity I could to provide for my family as best as I could. And it's tough. I'm covered in scars all over and broken inside. Story 31. My husband left me suddenly, took our daughter with him, and cut contact with me. When I tried to get her back, he falsely accused me of abuse to get an emergency order against me, had me removed from my house, and then used the order to try and push through an application for sole custody, with me getting occasional supervised visitation to try and make the separation between my daughter and me permanent. I didn't have any contact with my daughter at all for almost 3 weeks. I was so consumed with grief and the fear I might never see my daughter again that I couldn't eat and threw up every day. I went from just over 130 pounds down to just under 100 pounds in a little over 1 month. It took me 5 months to be able to eat a proper-sized meal again. I later found out that my husband had been having an affair, and his girlfriend told our daughter that I was trying to hurt her and she wasn't safe with me. She was 4 years old at the time. I can't look at them without reliving that horrible experience. But I currently have majority custody, I got my house back, and my relationship with my daughter has never been stronger. We're still in the middle of our custody battle, but we are going back to court soon, where I will hopefully be granted sole legal custody with my ex-husband having visitation every other weekend, unless our daughter wants to visit him more. Story 32. Finding out after 7 years of marriage that my wife was having at least one affair. I suspected for a while, but that's not really what broke me. What broke me was the fact that when she was caught, it was all my fault. The abuse after the fact was the hard part. The fact that I spent 7 years in what I thought was a great marriage to find out she was a terrible human with zero empathy or remorse was shattering. I did everything for her and did it happily. I was the breadwinner, nurse, accountant, and literally the one to do 99% of everything to keep our household and marriage running. I was also broken by the fact that I realized how used I was. I was nothing but a wallet, a roof over her head, and food on her plate, and everything she told me over the years was an absolute lie. I was less than nothing to her. I was trash. That's a hard thing to bear. Not to mention I was removed from my lease by her when I kicked her out and had to find a new place to live within 2 weeks and empty our house of 7 years worth of stuff and move in that time. I'm still recovering from that, and I don't know if I'll ever fully recover. Story 33. My mother died of a fentanyl overdose 6 years ago next month. She had addiction issues, but we thought she stopped using a long time ago. She was only 40 and my youngest brother had just turned 9. I was 23. I got a call while I was at work from my neighbor that I grew up with, that there were cops and my stepdad was outside crying. I had my now husband watch the register, and I raced home. I lived right next door to her, thinking she had gotten arrested. That was the worst case scenario in my mind as I sped the 5 minutes back to my place. I pulled into my driveway and didn't see anyone for a few seconds. Not my stepdad, just cop cars and an ambulance. I remember those few seconds because it was the last few seconds that everything was still normal. My aunt comes around the corner toward me with my grandma, frantic, yelling, "Mary's dead!" And they caught me as I began to fall. Everything fell down around me. My heart shattered because I had been afraid of this happening since I was 13. It was my worst fear, and here it was. All I could do in that moment was scream, "No, Mommy, no!" Even at 23, after I stopped crying, I just felt empty. I knew I had to tell my sister myself next, and then had to call my other brother, who lived with my dad at the time, and tell him over the phone. But the worst was all of us sitting down with my 9-year-old baby brother and telling him that his mom was gone. She was never coming back. He just put his head down because he knew. He wasn't stupid. When my stepdad found my mother, he sent my baby brother out of the house, and then our close friend took him to go get ice cream and stuff while the ambulance came and took her away. He knew something had happened. There's so many details to this story. If I kept writing, it'd be forever. But I haven't been the same since. I saw her body. The cops said I could come in and say goodbye. They stood around her as I saw her, lying there on a gurney, almost green with black stuff coming out of her mouth. Lying in the kitchen where I ate dinner and did my homework my whole life. My sister left me there because she couldn't handle it. I don't blame her, but I could have used someone in that moment. My brother and sister also have addiction problems, so I had to take care of a lot while all this was happening. I don't know if I ever fully grieved. My mom was my best friend. I saw her every day. She had me, her first child, at 17, and she always said it was like we grew up together. Ironically, our favorite show to watch together was Gilmore Girls. Anyway, that whole thing really changed me. It was so sudden. I'm always afraid someone I love is going to die now. I have diagnosed PTSD from it. I just got married in October, and not having her there felt so empty. My life just feels so empty without her. It destroyed our family, so literally everything changed. I lived in the apartment next to my childhood home for 2 or 3 more years after it happened. My grandmother owned the complex I lived in and my mom's house. Eventually, she rented my mom's house out to different people. They liked my mom's old curtains in the kitchen, so they kept them. Every day I'd come home from work and see her curtains. Sometimes it made me cry, sometimes I'd avert my eyes. Most times I'd just beg the universe for it to be a big joke. And I could knock on her door like I always did and talk to her about my day or what she thought of my outfit. But obviously that could never be. Those weren't her curtains anymore. Story 34. Early in our relationship, my wife told me that she was diagnosed with a mental health disorder as a teenager. I never would have guessed. She had a few quirks, sure, but doesn't everybody? While we were dating, she held jobs, graduated college, and maintained an active social life. We got married in 2019. I can't tell you how incredible she was for me. For the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to love someone and be loved. She was the most kind, sweet, loving person I've ever known. Near the end of 2020, things started feeling off. Her mood was increasingly negative. She began developing some unusual ideas. Our relationship was beginning to suffer. Given the year that was 2020, I thought it was only natural that a newlywed couple would have a hard time. She spent most of 2021 in a deep depression. She couldn't keep a job, and her ideas became more and more bizarre. In February of 2022, she stopped taking her medication. I tried to encourage her to talk to a doctor, but she refused. She had a complete mental health crisis soon after. She began hearing voices. She would scream at the top of her lungs that she was living in a nightmare. She would just take off in her car for days or weeks at a time. She was pulled over in another state for driving on the wrong side of the road. She was taken to jail twice. She's been hospitalized twice as well. Over the past year, I've watched the person I fell in love with completely disappear. She wants a divorce. We've begun filing the paperwork. I can't describe what it's like to watch the person I love more than anything in the world, the person who I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, just slowly vanish before my eyes. The only reason why I can even write all this is because today was a relatively good day. After her most recent hospitalization, she's finally decided that she wants to get back on meds and go to therapy. Her first appointment is tomorrow. She hasn't been taking her medication exactly as prescribed, but it's better than nothing. She still wants a divorce, but she wants to end things peacefully between us. There's a long road ahead, and I'm not sure if the person I married will ever come back, but I'm thankful that she's still on this earth, and I'm hopeful that someday she will have a good life, with or without me. Story 35. My daughter passing away at the age of 20 in a car accident absolutely breaks my heart just thinking about it. She passed on October 21st, 2022. I had last texted her 10 minutes before she passed. The last thing we told each other was, "I love you." The last time I saw her was the night before. My wife had made the Olive Garden Alfredo recipe, and it was delicious. My daughter was coming home around 9, so I stayed up playing a game with my buddy. When she got home, I warmed her food up for her. She loved it. My last image of her is her eating her pasta at our kitchen table. I was sleepy, so I went to bed. I regret not staying up with her. She was an amazing person. Losing her has completely broken me. I feel like less of a father because I couldn't save her. I feel guilt. I feel regret. I feel pain. I feel destroyed inside. I know I will never be the same again without my baby. I hate that she won't celebrate her 21st birthday. I hate that she won't see any more seasons of her favorite shows. I hate that she won't hear new songs from her favorite artists. I hate that she won't get to be a wife and a mother. I just hate not having her around anymore. I keep going for my wife and for my 24-year-old son. They're not the same anymore. Our family is forever broken. It hurts. It hurts so bad. In reality, there was nothing I could do, but it's not a good enough excuse for me. A father protects his babies, and I couldn't protect mine. Story 36. I remember being an innocent child until 8th grade. I made mistakes and did things I wasn't supposed to. I also didn't have the best upbringing, but my life was honestly fairly normal compared to what everyone else goes through. I didn't have any real issues other than slight confidence issues until my friend passed away unexpectedly. This completely rattled my 8th grade brain. Someone I spent the weekend with just before had gone home and taken her life after being mistreated by her parent. I had no idea her home life was like that, and it just shook me to my core. She was such a sweet and beautiful girl. Her whole family seemed so normal and happy. It just came as such a shock. I went from being a carefree child to a depressed pessimist in a day. I could barely get out of bed. When I would try to talk to anyone around me about anything, I would just break into tears. All my grades started to fall. I just fell apart. This affected me for years. People would bring it up from time to time in our small town, and I would just break down into tears. That happened in 2010, and I probably didn't stop thinking about it every day until 2017. Story 37. My dream since I was 5 was to become a husband and father. It's all I wanted out of life. I've taken classes on makeup so I could understand it and help any daughters I might have. I've worked for years to be financially independent, and over the course of the last 3 years, I fell in love with a beautiful girl who told me she loved me very much. I was saving up to buy an engagement ring when she left me and purposely started hanging out with people who have been brutally cold and hostile to me. She never explained why. She told my best friend she was glad to be rid of me since I wasn't helping pay for her housing anymore. She then started attacking my reputation when she heard I was dating other people months later. She was my first real love. Despite everything, part of me still wakes up wanting to send her a good morning message. And everything hurts to do. I can't sleep because I'm so hurt and angry. I can't watch the things we used to watch together. I can't go to the small town drive-in where we had our first kiss. I can't drive through her hometown. It hurts so much. She was terrible to me. She was emotionally abusive. I still miss her.